Hey everybody, happy Thursday. Welcome to another TechStrong TV broadcast. Today is Thursday, April 29th, the last Thursday of the month. I can't believe how quickly things are going these days. We have a fabulous broadcast for you today with so many great interviews, and we're going to kick things off with a conversation between Alan and Charles Weindorf, who is an author. He wrote a book called Leaders and Software Engineers: Communicate and Motivate Without Speaking in Code. Wow, what a relevant topic. He wrote it based on his lifetime of dealing with technical team members, and I'm sure it's a great read. But Charles and Alan talk about how organizations can effectively communicate within their ranks, and this book is a big part of that. So that was a great one. After that, Alan has a conversation with Steve Tack, who is the Senior Vice President of Product at Dynatrace. Dynatrace is one of the leaders in the application performance management space, the Magic Quadrant that Gartner puts out every year. And so Steve and Alan talk about why Dynatrace is where it is on that, in the leaders quadrant there, on the Magic Quadrant. Great conversation that they have about Dynatrace and its technology. So one worth checking out for sure. After that, Alan speaks with Ryan Olson, who was with the Unit 42 at Palo Alto Networks. We all know Unit 42 for its great threat research. Well, now they're also doing consulting. And so Ryan Olson, he says it helps fulfill his vision of delivering threat intelligence, cutting-edge resources, and to help two organizations. This is a great move for Unit 42, if I can say so myself. And it really does kind of help fill out their portfolio. And so Ryan and Alan talk about what this means for Unit 42, what this means for the industry in general. It's a great conversation. After that, we have our Something Old segment. This is from the most recent Cybersecurity Virtual Summit that we put on. It features a conversation between Upasna Gupta and Jonathan Bregman. Both are with the Prisma Cloud unit at Palo Alto Networks. And they are going to discuss detect, prioritize, and remediate risk from build to runtime. This session talks about how organizations can leverage the power of multi-vector threat intelligence and machine learning powered analysis to automatically prioritize risk and empower DevOps to address vulnerabilities before code ever reaches production in the first place. This is a great technology, and this is a great presentation overall, so you definitely want to give this one a listen. After that, we have the news headlines. I come on, as I always do, and then I have a conversation with Francis Zelazny, who is the CEO and co-founder of a company called Anonybit. Francis and I talk about privacy concerns that people have with vaccine passports, whether or not they're valid concerns, and some of the safeguards that developers should consider from a privacy and security perspective as they roll out applications for vaccine passports. As we all know, I don't like carrying around my big old CDC vaccine passport card, and so I think that mobile version of vaccine passports are coming on the horizon. They're fast and furious. So what Francis and I talk about is whether the mobile apps themselves are as secure as they could be, and what developers really need to keep in mind. So it's a great conversation. It's definitely one that's very relevant in today's landscape in general. After that, I speak with Edward Roberts, who is the Director of Strategy, Application Security at Imperva, and we talk about the findings from Imperva's Bad Bots report. It showed, among other things, that bad bots now comprise 25% of all internet traffic. Bots in general actually comprise half of all internet traffic, which kind of blows my mind. But we discuss the findings of the Bad Bots report and some of the things that organizations need to consider when they're fighting and hopefully remediating bad bots on their network. So definitely want to check that one out. After that, I've got the webinar's preview, as I always do. And then Mitch Ashley comes on with his Analyst Corner segment. He speaks with Andy Dovgan, who is the CEO of a company called Creatio, I think it is. They discuss the drivers of why low-code and no-code technologies have risen in use. A lot of that has to do with changes in companies' business model, the need for speed, and the drive for new applications. It's a story that we've heard over and over again during the pandemic, companies looking to digitally transform, and quickly low code has stepped in to fill a lot of the needs that organizations have had to accomplish that. So it's a great conversation between Andy and Mitch about low code technologies in general. After that, we have the View with Vizard segment. Mike Vizard speaks with Sysdig CEO Suresh Vasudevan. They talk about Sysdig picking up an additional $188 million in financing. And so Suresh explains why the convergence of IT roles requires a different approach to managing IT. This is a great conversation. And it really does kind of speak to the direction that the industry is headed in general. And the fact that Sysdig just garnered another $188 million in financing really speaks to the company and where they are in the IT sector in general. So this is a great conversation. Definitely want to check this one out. All right, that is the lineup for today's TechStrong TV broadcast, and we are going to get things kicked off right after these commercial messages.
CISO Talk. To hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Shimel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
All right, welcome back, everybody. First up, we have Charles Weindorf, who is an author. He speaks with Alan about his new book, Leaders and Software Engineers Communicate and Motivate Without Speaking in Code. Great conversation, and it was written based on his lifetime of dealing with technical team members. Great conversation. Let's give it a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us here on another TechStrong TV segment. My guest this segment is author Chuck Weindorf. Chuck's going to tell us about a new book he's written about digital leadership and software engineers. Chuck, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Thanks, Alan. I'm really glad to be here.
Yep. It's our pleasure to have you here. Chuck, if you've got a copy of the book, why don't you hold it up there for a moment and tell us, I didn't give the right title, I just said what it was about. But go ahead.
Yeah, by happy coincidence, I do have a copy of the book, Leaders and Software Engineers Communicate and Motivate Without Speaking in Code. This book is an accumulation of techniques that I've discovered about communicating with software engineers, how to lead them effectively, and how do you have them hear you correctly, understand the messages. They listen with a different set of ears. They communicate with a little different filter than everyone else. And so I've picked up over many years, coming from the field myself and then being in leadership for many years, what's the best way to make those connections?
Agreed. Why don't we give us a little bit of your background?
Great. So I came up in the finance and insurance industry. Erie Insurance is in my hometown, was a relatively small company, grew from a dozen engineers all the way up to 300. And when I had retired from Erie Insurance, I had reached the position of chief engineer. So I had spent my entire career throughout in software development and creating software from scratch. Highly technical and regulated in that finance industry, as you can imagine. But as a specialty, I really did like communication and constantly was either writing, speaking, presenting, or other things. And I was one of the engineers who would be tapped very frequently to get up on stage and to talk about the things happening within the engineering field, whether it was new technology or skills that we were trying to develop in the people.
Apps, great. And this is the first book you've written?
I did some fiction work 100 years ago, back in the day. This is my first nonfiction book, and it is, it's very much a compilation. So it's a series of around 140 short chapters and stories with different themes that I'm trying to make that key point, the point we're all going to work on together and take the journey forward. Very often, let's say our engineers just don't get the memo, whether it's the wording that's there or the intent, and it might take a little bit of additional effort to make sure we're all on the same page.
Fair enough. So, Chuck, I have a lot of friends who've written especially nonfiction books. I have some friends who've written fiction, but most friends that I know have written a book, it's been nonfiction. And I have a lot of other friends who want to or would like to and think they have a great nonfiction book they want to write. What kind of got you off of go here in writing this book? What motivated you to say, hey, I want to write a book on this?
Yeah, it was a little bit of just the nature of loving to write down a good story. And in some of my fiction works, it was very much about writing a long story, obviously. But what I really enjoyed that process. What I found out is that my career is a series of fairly humorous stories, most of which something is broken, breaking, going wrong, and what do we do to fix it? And you can take, after the stress is done, you can take a very positive, humorous view of what had just happened. So I started sharing these stories amongst my engineering team, and I had a mailing list internal to the company of about 700 individuals who would receive this weekly story of, hey, here's something that happened in my past, and it's happening now, and here's how we get past it. And from that, some people, hey, you really ought to start keeping a collection of these things. And it turned out over the course of time, about 3 years worth of writing went into the stories that are in this book today.
Fantastic. And then I want to jump into what the book is about, but I wanted to highlight, the trail of how an author gets this done. How did you go about getting this published?
Yes, the publishing game is very different. When I was writing fiction, I had a New York City literary agent. This is back in the 80s, and
right.
It was very traditional. The big manuscript went out door to door to door and came back, and they tried again. It is very different now, and it is in the world of nonfiction quite efficient to form your own small publishing company and to make connections to digital printing, the web for advertising, the Amazon bookstore, and other. There's just many ways to get your content off your desk and out visible to the world. So this is partially a self-publishing effort. I have paired up with a company called Book Launchers that will teach somebody who's an engineer what the steps are in order to be successful in launching a nonfiction book.
Excellent. Very cool. So, Chuck, let's dive into the book now. You've got a collection, which is about 140 chapters, each one being kind of its own little story. You've got to have some favorites among them, though. Can you highlight a couple of the favorites?
Sure. I do like to talk about the person. The first one is geniuses. The talent needed to be a good software engineer seems to be pretty rare. Only a couple % of people walking around probably have both the attitude for it and the talent for it. So whenever I am talking to engineers, I have to remember these folks are very much smarter than I am normally. And what I've constantly come across is that, they want to be, how do you give them the microphone at the right time? How do you listen to their ideas properly? But how do you also listen to others around them in order to get a groundswell of support or an understanding of a whole problem? Sometimes our genius is, hey, I know the answer right away. I'm like, okay, it might not be that simple. Another type is the all-star. The all-star is very much that individual who has learned a technology, is really good at it. I mean, top tier good, and very much so they sometimes can't share their work. well, I have to do that hard thing because I can't let somebody else do it. No, you're in a position, you got to teach people because there'll be a day when you and I aren't here and someone else has to step up to the plate and take a swing. Another one is introverts, and introverts seem to be prevalent in this field. Someone who can concentrate for long periods of time, go head down into code, understand little minute technical details, not miss the little things. However, drawing them out of their shell a little bit so that they can communicate better with their peer teams at work is the key for them. So, what's a great way to give them the spotlight and say, okay, everyone else stop talking because I need to hear this smart person over here say something. And that takes additional effort. The last category was a catch-all. It's like potpourri on Jeopardy. It is called uncommon sense. And uncommon sense falls into the category of the individual just thinks different than the average person. If I were to ask a software engineer, hey, take a look at that wall over there, what color is that? And a software engineer might say something like, well, this side of the wall is white. I'm like, okay, well, great. Did you ever think about the other side of the wall? Well, no, they can't see it, so they're not going to tell you the other side of the wall is white. Okay, I better remember to be very specific when I'm talking to certain individuals. Another uncommon sense story is the classic individuals talking to me. We're talking about a problem. We're walking out of the building, out to the parking lot. We get up to the parking lot, and the guy says, he looks around like, oh, I didn't drive today.
Oh, God.
I could have a ride home because I completely forgot that I took the bus here. So, okay,
Look, I got to admit, I might have done that once or twice. I'm wondering, Chuck, have you ever heard, in DevOps, which is one of the areas we cover pretty deep, of course, Gene Kim's kind of founding work on the subject is the Phoenix Project.
Yes.
And so there's characters in the Phoenix Project, and they kind of match up to some of the personality types you've mentioned there, right? There's the character of Brent, and Brent he's probably a genius and an all-star, but of course no one could do what he can do, and he's not going to show anyone how to do what he could do because, as what someone once told me, if I tell you everything, then I know nothing, right? And there was some of that going on there.
Yeah.
So I wonder, how if you take these personality types, I didn't say this. Let me back up. I know Gene Kim, and I met him when this was manuscripted, and I know personally some of the people that were kind of used as the role model for some of the personalities in the Phoenix Project.
Yes.
But talk to me about when you're making up these types.
Yes.
You have real people that you're basing them on, I assume, yeah?
100%. And not any one individual also, it's a nice blend.
No, they're composites.
Yes. And the Phoenix Project is brilliant, by the way. That's a tremendous study of folks in our field. DevOps for sure. How do you go fast and accurately through automation? Well, one person that I used as a model was my first chief engineer I came across. She was a little white-haired lady, looked like Grace Hopper, the Navy admiral years ago. Super brilliant. And her comment to me was, when I first arrived, I was a hobbyist. I did not go to college for this. Colleges didn't teach it when I started. So I just got into the field that way. And she says, oh, by the way, you're probably the least smart person in this room. I'm like, oh, you only known me for 2 minutes. It's amazing you've been able to come up with that.
Yeah.
And she says, no, it's not an insult. This is the average IQ might be 130 plus in the room already. And you're just getting started, so you're going to hear a lot of crazy things, and you have a lot to learn. In the introvert world, I was paired with an individual who was a fantastic software developer, just didn't like to talk. And according to my boss, I would never shut up. So we would have this nice balance of the person who has a lot of great of the thinking and that internal depth that's there, and then communicating why we should do certain things and how to bring the team together. That was my side of the role. And we even earned the title, the Erie Insurance Penn and Teller, where you've got, the one guy never says anything, never got another shuts up. Okay, you can now have a magic act. And so each of those stories do go into the book. Probably 50 different people contributed to the personalities and the stories that are in this book.
Excellent stuff. Chuck, for people who want to get the book, where can they go?
The book is on all the digital outlets, so the Amazons, the Barnes and Nobles. My personal site is leadingsoftwareengineers.com. So I didn't stay up all night thinking up that one. I am very much interested in also the stories around technology. If folks want to drop me a line and trade stories, I would be more than happy to do that. I'm at charles.weindorf@mudsox.com, MUDSOX.
Love it. Chuck, thanks for being on our show today. Congratulations on the book. Best of luck with it. And we'll definitely check it out.
Thank you very much.
This is Alan Shimel for TechStrong TV. We're going to take a break right now, and we'll be right back with another guest.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, next up, Alan speaks with Steve Tack, who's the Senior Vice President of Product at Dynatrace. They talk about Dynatrace's position as a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for Application Performance Management. Dynatrace is doing great, and Steve and Alan talk about what's happening with the company and why its customers are so gaga over the company. It's a great conversation. Let's give it a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us here on another segment for TechStrong TV. My guest this segment is Steve Tack of Dynatrace. Steve, welcome.
Hi, Alan. How's it going?
Good. You know, we were talking off camera, Steve. You were on TechStrong. It's got to be at least 5-6 months ago, a while ago. Many interviews ago. So welcome back. I see you're still at home. I'm still here, but hopefully things are getting a little better.
I hope so too. I'm actually, I'm one day, I got my second shot yesterday. So, you know, we'll see how things
Good.
go. And,
so you're T-minus 13 or so.
Yeah. And
so yeah, I got my second shot March 21st.
Nice.
So I'm good. I'm good. I actually went out to dinner Saturday night. We sat outside in a distant place, but we sat outside. It was the first time I had actually gone out like that in a long time. So that was good.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to things resuming a little bit more normalcy.
Yeah, I hope so too. It'll be 13 more days you're there. Anyway, Steve, but certainly technology and you know what's going on in our world of digital transformation and DevOps and everything keeps marching forward. And you know you are with Dynatrace, as I mentioned. Why don't you, if you don't mind, give our audience just a little kind of the your background, as well as I think people think they know Dynatrace, but I don't know if they really know Dynatrace. Right? It's been a history there. So why don't we do that as well?
Sure. So as you mentioned, I'm with Dynatrace and I lead the product management team. And so it's an R&D function at Dynatrace, but I spend probably as much of my time working with customers, prospects, partners, as I do with the internal product and engineering team. And that's really because, as you said, this market's moving so fast. We have to make sure we're out there learning, seeing what problems are unmet as people shift to DevOps or SRE culture or microservices, cloud native technology, and more. And really, that's where Dynatrace comes in. We help ensure our customers get the return and can move with the speed and innovation within those environments. And so, to put a little bit more context to that, historically, people might have thought of us in the monitoring aisle at the store. We've gone through this shift of observability as people have gone more cloud native. But at Dynatrace, we really believe that observability and the data is really the table stakes. So when we're working with our customers, we're not only providing them with full stack observability through the lifecycle, but we're doing it from an open, intelligent standpoint. So very much AI ops built into the core, foundation and automation. And as I said, really helping, whether it's the DevSecOps teams or others, making sure they're getting the most out of their digital investments and they can move with speed.
Absolutely. And Steve, this whole area has really, with COVID or without COVID, right? It's really undergone a real evolution in the last couple of years. When I first started DevOps.com, ALM was a thing, right? And application management and monitoring were really important, right? Companies like AppDynamics, Cisco acquired, New Relic, some of these others. I could probably rattle off 5 or 6 that have been acquired over the years or have gone through, right? But application management was real, right? And then we saw sort of this shift. I don't know, I'm going to say 4 years ago, where all of a sudden, instead of just monitoring and managing applications, we put the AI spin on it, AI ops.
Right.
And it was a nice term, it was a buzzy word. But I think people began to realize that what's AI versus ML, let's say? Is it truly AI? Aren't we still doing the same old monitoring we were? And then before we could even really answer that question, right, all of a sudden this new term burst onto our horizon, observability, right? Right. And now everything, it's all about the observability. It's all about the base, right? It's all about the observability. Right. And so, companies like Dynatrace, you've been through this, rapid fire kind of evolution. Are we still talking about the same thing, or has it fundamentally changed?
So I know what has changed is the world that customers are trying to perform, whether you want to call it observability or else in there. And I think that's what caused maybe more a little bit of the disruption in the market. And you referenced some other vendors, great products for kind of traditional J2EE, type of world. Once we moved to much more frequent releases and microservices, that broke a lot of existing approaches, whether it be the scale or how dynamic the environments were. And so I think that gave rise to the new term. The other thing that happened was a lot of the silos started breaking down. So it used to be everyone kind of was in their lane, had their own part of the tech stack, and we're seeing tremendous convergence across those different areas. And when we get into kind of the debates around the terms, I always just try to throw it back into what the customer is trying to achieve. I think that's what we try to make sure we do at Dynatrace is focus on the outcomes, not get too much into, like you said, is this truly AI or ML? What matters to us is the world's moving too fast for humans to do it alone. And so what analytics, what intelligence do you put in to make sure you can help them automate root cause, help them continually optimize performance of these systems, and that's really kind of what's important to us is when our customers get those returns. And so, yeah, markets move fast, but I think if we put the center point back there, we have seen the change. But what's the old adage? It might not repeat itself, but history rhymes, and so I think we see some of those same constructs, but it definitely is a new landscape in terms of speed and the tech landscape.
Excellent. And I guess, this leads us right into, some of the things we want to talk about today, which was recently Gartner came out with a Magic Quadrant. I'll let you say it, talk about it. What's the scoop there?
Yeah, so Gartner has historically issued an application performance monitoring Magic Quadrant, and we were fortunate enough to be selected as leader both on the vision side as well as execution side. And to us, once again, I think a Magic Quadrant is also a reflection of what value you're delivering in the field. It's not like a standardized test where you can answer questions very eloquently and smartly if the customers aren't there and sharing the proof of what they're getting out of it. So we're proud of that, but more, once again, back to the value we deliver to our customers. Now, there's also, we were just talking about it, is it monitoring, is it observability? I think if you look and you read the research that people are putting out, if you see what customers are doing, they are evolving it. So I think even Gartner, I won't get the words exactly right, but when they talk about application performance monitoring, they use terms like observability. They use concepts like how the infrastructure or supporting cloud services support the app. They talk about the importance of the digital experience to the user. And so it's not just, once again, about monitoring an individual component. It's really about the value that all the apps and infrastructure are ultimately delivering to the user, where that value truly gets realized.
I get it. Got it. Yeah, it is. I mean, look, Gartner's not one to change terms unnecessarily, right? So they'll stick with APM. But, I think they're recognizing and they're hearing from their customers that today's APM, deals with a lot of observability. More and more people are working in cloud native environments, and that's in hybrid and multi-cloud kind of settings and everything else. So, whether they call it APM or something else, the kinds of solutions that customers are demanding, the kinds of problems that are needing to be solved here have continued to move beyond where we were, 7 years ago, 8 years ago.
Exactly. And I think that, so there's a Magic Quadrant that represents the company as a whole, but then there's also the complementary or companion document that they call the critical capabilities. Yep. And so to your point, the use cases are evolving, the audiences are evolving. So Gartner just didn't talk about the application management teams, but when they talk about the audiences, they're talking about SRE teams and cloud ops teams and the line of business and application owners that need to get involved and their requirements, because not only is the tech stack collapsing and converging, but we were talking about DevOps a little bit before the show started, and just the collaboration that these enterprises require to really fulfill the mission. And so I think if you maybe more from a product mindset, if you look at the critical capabilities document, you can see how that evolves as well. And we think Gartner's defined that well. I mean, we have a biased opinion, an opinion that is based on our customer engagement as well. But definitely think that that's trending in the right direction, even though, to your point, some of the terms might be established.
Fair. Steve, we was about a year ago come June, we did TechStrong Con, which was the genesis of this whole TechStrong TV thing we've been doing for over a year now. And the idea behind it was, wow, with everything going on a year ago, what can we expect? What do we see changing? What do we see evolving? And so now we're planning TechStrong Con 2, right, this coming June. Which will be here before you know it. It's just a couple months already. We're rapidly going through April, right? And we're looking at, okay, we're a year past last year, and we're getting vaccines. We're hoping to see some sort of new normal starting to emerge. How do you think that that will affect sort of whatever you want to call it, APM, observability, this whole space of that we're talking about? What do you think, how is it changing from, let's say, a year ago to now?
That's, wow, there's a couple of ways to attack that question, probably. The one that I'm most excited about It'll bridge a little bit off of what we were just talking about in terms of collaboration. I think the SRE culture, the movement, DevOps, those are really one of the big things I've seen shift, and it's made possible by the tech stack. But more and more, I'm seeing customers create these self-service platforms. So leveraging Kubernetes, OpenShift, one of the hyperscaler variants, maybe, but then putting more capabilities or enablement into the engineering teams that are driving new services. And so the pace was there. People are moving fast before, but the degrees of automation people are putting into their companies is what I find the most compelling. And I think that we can help play a role in that too. Not to give the shameless vendor plug, but I think to really drive and off of automation, you really need answers. And one of the big shifts that we see, maybe a little bit more targeted into the space Dynatrace plays in, is that this observability wave came, but people are talking about it in context of just data. They're talking about it in context of metrics, logs, traces, et cetera. But what are you going to do with that? And that's really where we believe as an industry moving forward, you need the data. I mean, that's why Dynatrace is one of the top 3, 4, 5 contributors to standards like OpenTelemetry. But it's then the answers and what you drive from that. And I think that'll be another big wave. People are getting visibility back into the stacks. They might have lost it when they shifted from the monolith and broke it down to the microservice architecture or cloud native technologies. But once they're finding they get that visibility back, how can they use it to drive more speed? And that's, I think, a theme that we'll really see kick in through the back half of 21 and into 22.
See, to me, that's the AI ops piece of it, right? So data, we're drowning in data. We need tools that help us make sense of that data. But making sense of that data is really just the beginning, not the end of the journey. Right? Because the data's coming in so fast and furious. You make sense of it, and then what do? What actionable intelligence and what actions do you take based upon making sense of that data? And there's so much of it. Is it humans that need to make every decision based upon that data? Or can we use some sort of AI, whatever you want to call it, AI, ML, I don't care. But can we use some sort of automation intelligence there that will allow us to act on that, right? And faster than we can. Otherwise, we're just going to always be the bottleneck.
Exactly.
And so to me, that's where we need maybe some breakthroughs. Some is that? I'm wondering where's Dynatrace at?
No, that's at that's the center point of our investments right now, and really why we believe we're getting the recognition that we've received coming into this call. It's the multi-cloud observability has to be there, and you brought some of those items up around DevOps and hybrid, and still leveraging traditional technologies all the way back to System Z or whatever that might be, but that's really just the start of the journey. And so we're doing things along the lines of, we talked a little bit about topics like application security, but we also introduced our cloud automation module at our user show just a few months back. And so for the last few years, we've been working through an open source project called Captain. We donated it to the CNCF. It reached sandbox project status, but that's where we don't want to stop just with the observability piece, but how can we then drive in the automation to do things like, hey, let's look and implement quality gates so we know if we want to promote into production or not, but let the systems handle that based on the criteria you set. Or if we're experimenting in production with canary releases or something along those lines, let's also be smart enough to do things like self-healing problem remediation, rollbacks of releases based on the results we're delivering to users. And I think that might be one topic we haven't hit on as much, but in our industry, we tend to focus maybe a little bit on the back end, what's running in the cloud, what's happening, can we optimize this piece of code? But the digital experience is really where we try to prioritize a lot of our analysis in terms of, is the application, the service meeting the needs of the user? And so driving decisions based off business outcomes and business analytics, that's another thematic area that we continue to invest in, and that I think the industry will continue to drive once again as they start to give visibility into things like the Kubernetes stack and more. It's more what workloads are running on top and how do those impact your business, and that's where we need to put our focus.
Excellent. Steve, we're coming up on time limit here, but for people who maybe want to go download, or I don't know, are you guys making the supplement of the Magic Quadrant available?
We are. I think if you just go to dynatrace.com, there's a reprint that's available to anyone. And then I thought you were going to actually talk about try Dynatrace, because there's a free trial there too. And I think in the world of, we were joking about marketing a little bit leading into the call, you got to try out the offerings. You got to put it to test in production environments. That's how you really tell the difference between an offering at that site. So both of those are available right on dynatrace.com for anyone that wants to try it out.
I leave those things to you, Steve. Otherwise, I lose my objectivity. But hey, man, thanks for telling us about the free trial and the Magic Quadrant. Thanks for coming on. Don't wait 6 months to come back, man. Keep us posted.
All right. Thank you very much, Alan. Thanks for having me.
All right. Steve Tack here, SVP Product at Dynatrace, talking about a recent Magic Quadrant, which Dynatrace was obviously featured in. And that's it for this one. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with our next guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Next up, we have a conversation between Alan and Ryan Olson with Unit 42 at Palo Alto Networks. Unit 42 is now doing consulting in addition to its great security threat research. Ryan talks about how this fulfills his vision of delivering threat intelligence, cutting-edge resources, and help to organizations. Great stuff. Let's get to it.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us here on another TechStrong TV interview. My guest for this interview is Ryan Olson. Ryan is with our friends at Unit 42 over at Palo Alto Networks. Ryan, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Thanks for having me on, Alan.
It's my pleasure to have you on. I got to tell you, you've got some big shoes to fill, because usually we have Jen Miller as a regular guest on here, and Jennifer always does a great job.
Jen's great.
Our audience. Yep. But Ryan, since you're not Jen, hi, I'm not Jen. Why don't we start with maybe a little bit of who you are and what you do at Palo Alto from the audience?
Yeah, so I joined Palo Alto Networks right about 7 years ago, and the idea when I came into the company was to form Unit 42. And at the time, we didn't have a threat intelligence team. We didn't have a group of people who were looking at all the data that the company was collecting from the perspective of, let's try to holistically understand adversaries. How are they attacking our customers? What are they trying to accomplish? So the original idea behind Unit 42 was just that. Let's build a team who can focus, not be dedicated to one product or another, but be focused on the adversary themselves, understanding how they're launching these attacks, and provide that data really in two directions. One, inside to the product team so that they can understand better how do they defend against these threats, what are the most common attacks, what are the most advanced attackers doing, and then externally to be able to share that information with government, partners inside the industry, and really the public to be able to help educate people and understand these are the threats that we're seeing every day. They shift from time to time. There's commonalities between them. But one of the things that we continuously see is that attackers are always getting better. And that means understanding how they operate is key to any enterprise who wants to defend their network.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so 7 years, you were the progenitor, the initiator, if you will. I don't want to say a word I can't pronounce good. At Unit 42, what's your current title there, though, Ryan? So
Ryan needs those.
Yeah, so I'm the Vice President of Threat Intelligence for Unit 42 and then overall for Palo Alto Networks, since we are the primary threat intel function for the entire company.
Good work, man. I think we did a good job laying that. So you're here to share some news with us. Why don't share away?
Unit 42 has been through a lot of evolution over the last 7 years. Along with Palo Alto Networks, we went from being just a next generation firewall company to expanding our portfolio greatly to include endpoint components, to include cloud security components. And last year, we acquired a company who was focused on security consulting, specifically on incident response and really helping our customers, our clients, when they are in their deepest time of need. That company was called Crypsis. We acquired them late last year. And what we announced this week is that we've combined the former Crypsis team and the former Unit 42 intelligence team into one organization, all underneath the Unit 42 banner, so that we can combine our resources and really go and deliver a better product for our clients, as well as incorporate intelligence into the operations that they are running. The Crypsis team, they've been operating for years. They run 1,300 incidents every single year, and that's continuing to increase. So the insight that they gain from running these incidents, helping their clients understand how they were compromised and get back to a good state, is great detail for us to be able to anonymize and use to create product protections, as well as to track adversaries across multiple companies. Who are they trying to attack? What industries are they operating in? What parts of the world are they operating in? That's another component of this combination of the two teams. Crypsis had formerly been focused mostly in North America, but we're also investing in the team to expand into Europe, into Asia, into the Middle East, so that we can provide better global coverage from a security consulting perspective. And along with that, increase our threat intelligence footprint as well, to be able to deliver better intelligence, both to those clients, as well as directly to existing Palo Alto Networks customers who are using all of our products.
Fair. Good stuff. So, and if I'm wrong, I apologize in advance and correct me. Unit 42, in my mind, was almost threat intelligence and research, almost in a pure sense, if you will, right? Threat intelligence for threat intelligence.
Reasons. Pure
yes.
research, right?
Now it sounds, and I'm not familiar with is it the Crypsis?
Crypsis was their brand. Yeah. Now they're Unit 42 Security Consulting.
So now we're adding a security consulting sort of business on top of the research arm.
Yep.
And
how do you think, is that going to have any change on the scope or the kinds of research and threat intel that you do at Unit 42?
I think it's going to continue to expand the scope of the research that we've been performing. And if you've been following our research, since 2014, the types of data and the type of research we've been able to perform has continually sort of increased. We started primarily focused on malware. That was the data that we had coming from the Palo Alto Next Generation Firewall into our malware analysis platform, Wildfire. As we expanded and we started getting more data from endpoints, from the Cortex products, more data from the cloud, from the Prisma products, we also started publishing research into those areas. And what we were never able to do as successfully when it came to adversary tracking was to go beyond and say, what actually occurred in an intrusion? Most of our products have been focused on preventing successful attacks. So a lot of the data we had was on this attack was stopped. We saw this piece of malware at this moment. With the addition of the information, the insight we can gain from engaging with the Crypsis, now Unit 42 security consulting team, we can get more insight into those thousands of incidents and say, what actually happened from that adversary inside the network? What commands did they run on systems? What data were they trying to steal? All of that data is helpful to us, both in informing our intelligence processes and things that we might publish out to the world as we continue to do, but also to bring that back to, let's say, our next-gen firewall team and say, this is a technique that we're seeing more commonly. Let's make sure that we are preparing for that from a roadmap perspective and that we're prepared to stop this threat against our much larger customer base.
Fair enough. Good stuff. So Ryan, how should customers engage with this new Unit 42?
What I'd ask people to do is two things. One is unit42.paloaltonetworks.com. That's still the place that we're going to continue publishing all of our threat research, all of the intelligence that we have on different adversaries as far as what we're pushing out into the world. And the second one is head back to the main Palo Alto Networks website. Now there's a section of that website that's dedicated entirely to intelligence and security consulting. They can learn more about the offerings that we have in place, and get links back to the different kinds of intelligence that we're producing. And obviously, anyone who might be experiencing an incident right now and needs direct assistance, there's information there as far as there's a button, there's phone numbers, there's emails that they can reach out to so that they can have an instant response team get back to them to help them get back in a good condition.
Nice. Ryan, just any, without asking you to say anything that's going to get you in trouble, what do you think is on sort of the short-term horizon here? Because it's going to be interesting, right?
Sure.
So the Threat 42 team is now going to be doing their normal research and seeing trends and things happening. And that gets, rubber meets the road where these consultants are actually dealing with real-life customers, and they can take that intel and make it actionable.
Absolutely. So it's really that taking intelligence and making it actionable. For most threat intel teams, I'll say it can start in two different directions, but I'll tell you that most of them start from the perspective of, let's build a threat intelligence team that's going to offer intelligence service to clients, write reports for them, provide them data. They start there. That's the beginning. And then it's up to the client to take that intelligence and translate into that something that's actionable for them. Let's say it's an indicator feed, a bunch of bad domains. They have to take that and find a system inside their network to block all those bad domains. What we've been doing the last 7 years is dedicating our threat intelligence operation both to sharing with the public, which is part of what we're doing now, part of what we do through our blog, but also driving that directly into our products. So if we want to block a domain, we have this huge product portfolio that we can already offer that to our customers through. So what we've already done sort of the second half of this equation. You want to have great intelligence and be able to provide things to clients. You want to be able to take action on that in an automated way as quickly as possible through a product that has good visibility and has a good control point. We've already got those in place. Now we get to merge those together into a single thing. And that's where we get to bring all that insight that we're gaining from those consulting operations into direct product improvements. Some of those are going to be tactical. Some of those are going to be, we ran an incident, we saw an organization who was impacted. We'll take the IOCs from that incident and, as we can, use them to protect all of the rest of our customers. That's a direct actionable benefit. But I really think the value is going to come from our better understanding of the adversaries who are targeting these clients and the techniques that they're employing. If they're using 50 different techniques that are common, and we're mapping those to our own processes, to MITRE's attack framework, so we can say, we see these individual techniques used in this campaign, and then the next day we see a separate set of techniques. Having all of that data organized and having real world data from these actual incidents is going to enable our product teams to say, let me get the most bang for my buck. I've got limited development time. I've got a roadmap that I need to go and knock down. Let's make sure that we're providing the best security possible to our customers who are buying all of the products that we've already got deployed.
Got it. Man, this sounds exciting.
I'm very excited. And I'll say to the potential concern of, hey, are we not going to get any free stuff from Unit 42 anymore? Are we going to quit sort of having that altruistic mission? That is not at all the case. We continue to publish. We want to share what we know with the world. We're going to continue sharing with the cybersecurity community as well. The Cyber Threat Alliance, which is a group of security vendors who have joined together to share intelligence with each other. Jen's probably talked about them in the past.
Yes, we have.
We continue to push that group and grow it. They're up over 30 members now, and we have no reason to stop sharing what we know with that group, because we truly think that You cannot defend against all threats as a single organization. Nobody has complete visibility. We've got good visibility and growing visibility, but if we can get insight from other organizations as well, that just improves the entire community. And it makes it harder for bad guys, which at the end of the day is everybody's goal here. If we can make it harder for bad guys to do their job, everybody is succeeding, but across enterprise, across home users, everybody.
I love it. It's good stuff. Ryan, you mentioned the URL earlier, but give it to us again where people, if they want to engage here.
Unit42.paloaltonetworks.com. That's the place to get to us.
It's still the same Unit 42 website, like always. Great.
Yep. We got a new logo, but same website.
New logo. Is that on your shirt, the new logo, or no?
This is not the new logo. I'll show you the new logo since I can. I've got a hat with it. There you go. That's the new logo. So it's aligned well with the Palo Alto Networks logo. I'm very happy with it. Happy to get new swag as well, as everyone in our industry knows.
Don't we?
Hoodies, hats, we love it. Yep.
Hats, T-shirts, anything. We live for vendor wear. Hey man, Ryan, thanks for coming on TechStrong TV today and giving us this news. This is really exciting. Best of luck as this new, combined unit comes out as an entity and force in the market. I'm sure you or Jen or someone will come on and keep us posted.
Absolutely. We're always going to have lots to share.
Good. All right. Ryan Olson, VP for the Unit 42, the new Unit 42 unit at Threat Research and Consulting Unit at Palo Alto Networks, here on TechStrong TV. This is Alan Shimel. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with another guest.
All right, next up, we have our Something Old segment. This is from the recent cybersecurity virtual event. Features Upasna Gupta and Jonathan Bregman, both with Prisma Cloud at Palo Alto Networks. They discuss detect, prioritize, and remediate risk from build to runtime. Talks about how leveraging the power of multi-vector threat intelligence and machine learning powered analysis can automatically prioritize risk and empower DevOps to address vulnerabilities before code ever reaches production in the first place. Gotta love that machine learning. It's a great conversation. Let's give it a listen.
Hello, and everybody. Welcome to our session today. Jonathan and I are going to be talking about how you can detect, prioritize, and remediate your risk right from build to runtime in order to ensure that your applications are protected throughout their entire life cycle. I'm Upasna. I recently joined Palo Alto Network, and I am responsible for driving the cloud workload protection strategy. I have a decade worth of experience in actually driving go-to-market for a lot of storage technologies, and I worked at EMC, Nutanix, and more recently at AWS. And I'm very excited to be a part of Palo Alto Network, and now here talking to you about how customers can manage their risk better. Jonathan.
Hey folks, I'm Jonathan, and I'm also on the Prisma Cloud product marketing team, focused primarily on the cloud security posture management and cloud infrastructure entitlement management capabilities. Previously, I've worked at Barracuda Networks, I've worked with Microsoft, and have spent about a decade working in product marketing with various cloud technologies. Back over to you, Upasna.
Thank you, Jonathan. I think this is a very interesting topic that we have today. And if you go on to the next slide, I just want to highlight how the cloud has really changed the game for everyone. Because of cloud, organizations are innovating more rapidly, more independently than they ever have done before. It's given a platform to the developers by which they can leverage its ephemeral, its highly scalable nature to essentially move from monolithic to a microservices-based architecture, which ultimately provides them with a very decentralized approach to how you can build software. Now, this is great. This is a lot of benefits. This accelerates your time to market, but it does mean that you have a lot more entities to protect than you were previously protecting. Also, we often see, and this is especially true as I'm talking to a lot of customers, that the speed of delivery may come at the expense of security. With the emergence of cloud, we've seen the rise of DevOps and eventually DevSecOps, which is a great thing. But this is why we are seeing this trend, because we want to ensure that optimal balance between velocity and security of your applications. And if security is more automated, it becomes an integral part of your app development lifecycle, we can ensure that the speed of delivering your applications does not come at the expense of securing your applications. I think it's also important to realize that what's bringing in a bit more complexity is that we're in an era of multi-cloud and hybrid cloud deployments. A cloud-first strategy is a given, but customers are using a lot of service providers now. They're using AWS, they're using Azure, they're using GCP based on different use cases and based on specific needs that they have. So now imagine the complexity associated with trying to build the visibility and protection for such a heterogeneous environment. So it's always important to keep in mind that your security solution should bring consistency across these different cloud vendors, across different tech stacks, and different application components. Jonathan, the next slide. With the advent of cloud, I think it's also important to think about how you're deploying your applications today. Enterprises today are using a combination of, you can see cloud VMs, containers, Kubernetes, containers as a service, platform as a service, and even serverless functions. And that's why it becomes even more important that you leverage a unified agent framework so that you can secure all these different types of workloads and architectures. We ran a survey last year, and we surveyed approximately 3,000 organizations across the globe. And we found a lot of these customers continue to use cloud VMs, but they're also rapidly adopting containers. And this was sort of validated by a CNCF survey as well, which showed that 84% of their respondents were already using containers in production. And 40% of those respondents said that security is one of the biggest challenges when it comes to using and deploying containers. But I do want to stress on the fact that cloud VMs are also not going anywhere. So you really need to think about how you provide a more in-depth defense, which is a combination of vulnerability management, compliance, runtime protection across these different stacks and across different cloud providers as well. Next slide. Okay, with this, now the slide, I know this looks very scary. Like my intent is not to create fear, but rather create awareness towards a lot of threats that exist today. Just I'll pause and I'll let you take a moment to go through these different stats. But essentially, what our threat researchers found was that they did an in-depth analysis, and approximately 200,000 infrastructure as a code templates had at least one or more high or medium severity vulnerability. This was pretty shocking for me because I personally thought that IAC templates are a way for different teams to enable a systematic way to enforce security standards. But it seems that this capability of these templates is largely unharnessed today. What we're also seeing is a dramatic increase in application vulnerabilities. There was another report that I read, And it said that 80%, there's been an 88% growth in application vulnerabilities over 2 years. And to make matters worse, the median time it takes from when a vulnerability is added to when an open source package is used to fix it can be over 2 years, which is pretty substantial. And the last thing that I kind of read in a Gartner report was that, while these breaches continue to happen, over 90% of these breaches will be a result of customer mistake or a customer action of some sort. So this was pretty staggering to me. So the relevance of the next slide would I think a lot of you will appreciate. And it's not something that you haven't seen before. I think this is probably something that most of you are aware of. A lot of cloud service providers have been talking about it for a while. Like they indicate what they secure versus what customers need to secure. But it really is important for you to understand that differentiation. Customers do have the responsibility of securing their data, of securing their environment, which includes hosts, containers, serverless. You're also responsible for solving your configuration challenges and your access and identity related issues as well. Whereas the cloud service providers will continue to support and secure the underlying infrastructure. And at Prisma Cloud, our mantra has always been to provide you with the most unified and the most integrated solution so that you can tackle these different aspects that you're obligated to protect in the easiest possible way, and you leave no application, no workload unprotected. So I think it's something that all organizations and all customers should be mindful of as they think about security. Now, in the next slide, I want to talk about why it's even more important to not just think about different cloud vendors that you may be using, different technology stacks that you may be using. But again, why should you be thinking about security across the entire development lifecycle of your application? And it's one of my favorite slides because it really highlights for our customers that you not only need an integrated and an automated solution, but you also need to protect this entire app lifecycle. And the earlier you embed security into your dev lifecycle, the faster and safer the rollout of your applications will be. At least from what I've seen when I talk to customers, organizations and security teams focus a lot on runtime side of things. But this puts a lot of pressure on developers to fix issues that are found after the application has been deployed in production. And this imbalance not only risks delays in application deployment, but it also results in security missteps at the application development stage that may actually expose your cloud to more attacks and is a lot more costlier to fix after you've found these issues, after the product has been released. So I think more and more organizations need to think about how they can shift left and ensure more streamlined rollout of applications in production. So what this means is you need to think about how you can prioritize integration of your vulnerability and your IAC scanning across your IEDE and your CI tools. You need to be mindful of scanning your repos and registries, and you need to ensure greater compliance during the deployment phase before you head into the runtime phase. And I'll dive into each of these issues. But again, one of the key takeaways that I want you guys to take from this slide is that think about the heterogeneity of your environment. Leverage a solution which is able to bridge that visibility regardless of the cloud that you're using, regardless of the cloud architecture that you may have, and regardless of what stage you are in your application lifecycle. So very important to think of a cloud native security solution, which is not only best of breed, but also holistic in how it supports your security needs. Okay, let's dive a little bit into each of these different phases. I think you guys must be thinking, we get it. We need to start early, but how does Prisma Cloud help me do that? How do you help me do that? So one of the coolest things is Prisma Cloud leverages continuous vulnerability intelligence and risk prioritization across your cloud native architecture and gives you real-time connectivity graphs and vulnerability data. Like I mentioned earlier, you can easily integrate vulnerability and IAC scanning across your IDE, SCM, and CI tools. So whether you're running CloudFormation or Terraform or any other IAC services, you can very easily use Prisma Cloud to detect risks quickly and early in that build phase. But what I really, really love is that Prisma Cloud gives you more context about that risk. Now, what I mean by that is Prisma Cloud will automatically risk rank the vulnerabilities that the developers need to focus on. And I think that's really cool. This differentiation is very important because it's very easy to build a security tool that gives you alerts on everything possible. But that's probably not a good thing. You'll end up with a lot of noise and you really don't know what to work on first and how to prioritize things. So the ability to provide you that context and give you a list of prioritized risks really allows you to maintain a streamlined and an agile development process. And again, as you can see in this slide, we integrate with the most common SCM and CI tools. So our goal continues to be to roll out solutions which allow you to leverage your existing investments. Okay, let's move on and see what happens in the deploy phase. And similar to the build phase, in the deploy phase, Prisma Cloud can help you automate your vulnerability scanning for your repos and for your registries. This is the time you will build additional guardrails to flag your compliance issues. And with Prisma Cloud, we give you the ability to get as granular as you want. You can leverage out-of-box compliance checks, or you can even build your own custom checks. And I think that's pretty powerful. And we've done that in a way that you can reuse some of the existing scripts across your containers and across your hosts so that there is more time for you to focus on things that are more strategic rather than more tactical in nature. And again, Prisma Cloud integrates with most notable registries because we do know that you have a very heterogeneous environment. So regardless of what you use, Prisma Cloud will automate the vulnerability scanning for your repos and your registries. Moving on to runtime. At runtime as well, we give you a comprehensive visibility of your environment. You can automatically establish a baseline behavior application of your app as soon as you deploy your application across any environment. And you can also customize this protection to meet the needs of your environment. But the cool thing is that this runtime defense includes a set of features that provide you with both predictive as well as a threat-based active protection model for your containers, for Kubernetes, hosts, and even serverless functions. So an example of this would be, of a predictive protection capability would be like you can determine when a container runs a process which was not included in the origin image. And again, the context around the risks is also very important. So we supplement this visibility with capabilities like top 10 risk lists, regardless of what your architecture looks like. It's pretty amazing when you don't have to spend your time figuring out what issues to address first. And we also build risk profiles and risk trees so that you can deep dive to analyze the issues at hand. And again, we integrate with the most common alerting and SIM tools, which means regardless of what you use, you can easily integrate those with Prisma Cloud and maintain your typical alert and remediation processes. Now, as a best practice recommendation, we hope you address risks and vulnerabilities early on so that your threat footprint is low. But Prisma Cloud has a very robust runtime threat detection and management solution. And Jonathan, who you just met, will walk you through some of these capabilities. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thanks. That was awesome. Awesome. So, all right, folks, as Upasana just covered how you can effectively manage vulnerabilities and actually prevent these risks from ever reaching production in the first place. Not only does resolving issues early in the development lifecycle vastly reduce your threat footprint at runtime, as Upasana is covering, but also by taking this preventative approach to security, we see organizations save tremendous time and costs and just the general burden of having to fix vulnerabilities later down the road. That said, nearly every organization, not every organization has fully operationalized security controls across their software development pipeline, exposing lots of potential threats at runtime that can quickly overwhelm SOCs. Just given the dynamic distributed nature of cloud environments, where multiple autonomous teams can access these environments globally, resources tend to have very short lifespans. As Upasana said, they're ephemeral in nature. It just gets very hard for security teams to prioritize the most critical issues. So anyhow, all right, let's take a look at how Prisma Cloud, or really any security tool for that matter, goes about making threat detection manageable at runtime for today's SOC. So first and foremost, knowing what permissions each user has, that is, what actions they can take on what cloud resources, is foundational. If we think back on nearly every major breach that has made headlines, it's been attributed to a user with overly permissive access who's been able to gain access, make changes to specific resources like storage services that they should not have been able to in the first place. So effectively managing user permissions and continuously enforcing least privilege access is perhaps the most foundational threat vector to address in public cloud. And Prisma Cloud solves this by automatically calculating the net effective permissions, if you will, of every user, every resource entitlement, and then automatically makes recommendations to ensure the principles of least privileged are followed. And your data stored in public cloud storage services like AWS S3 is another potential threat vector at runtime that needs to be monitored. So I'm talking about going beyond just configuration of the storage service, ensuring it's not accidentally exposed to the public internet, for example. It's also important to ensure you're not storing malware that can easily spread across your cloud environment from these data storage services. There's a few ways that you can address this. Prisma Cloud leverages the Wildfire malware analysis engine to ensure you're not storing any data that contains malware. So network threat detection is probably the most obvious vector to be mindful of. Certainly the most common solution here is deploying a virtualized firewall, which is no doubt an important tool in your overall threat detection strategy. That said, cloud environments are exposed to some more unique threats, as Upasana talked about earlier. Unit 42 discovered things like cloud accounts hijacked for mining Bitcoins, found through analyzing network flow logs. This is not a typical threat we see on premise. And so given some of these more unique situations, it's critical to monitor your network flow logs, your VPC flow logs, and other activities that could signal any sort of unusual behaviors or presence of a threat. One way Prisma Cloud addresses this is by shipping with hundreds of pre-built security policies that monitor and alert on some of these more cloud-specific threat vectors. The last threat vector I want to highlight is the importance of monitoring and detecting anomalous behaviors, such as port scans or port sweep activities that could signal a malicious insider before a breach has actually occurred. So users accessing cloud resources or deploying new ones that are outside of their normal patterns. Getting back to what I had said earlier about just the dynamic distributed nature of cloud environments, where thousands of distributed users, theoretically anywhere in the globe, can make changes, can deploy new accounts, all without traditional IT gates of the on-premises world. This can open the door for multiple threats that need to be accounted for, where traditionally more static, positive versus negative security rules really aren't adequate. So Prisma Cloud augments all of the rule-based policies I've discussed earlier with an entire class of anomaly-based policies which leverage the over 5 billion cloud logs the platform processes, and then uses advanced techniques such as machine learning and statistical modeling to detect and alert on a wide array of anomalous activities and behaviors, with the ultimate goal of detecting unknown threats that, again, more traditional security tooling would miss. All right, so I've talked about the sort of essential threat vectors to monitor at runtime. Now let's look at how a platform-based approach like Prisma Cloud really brings this all together. So instead of looking at each vector individually, perhaps using different tools to address each in isolation, where alerts are generated that lack context, this is the path that ultimately leads down the road of SOC fatigue. Prisma Cloud stitches together a more comprehensive picture, drawing on all of these telemetry points. The platform goes beyond configuration management, which no doubt helps with risk mitigation, but also correlates user permissions, the network activities, the behavioral modeling, and really builds a deep contextual understanding of risk. So this enables the platform to automatically risk rank alerts by level of severity. This enables security teams to quickly prioritize what is the highest impact threats that need to be addressed first in their cloud environments. And then furthermore, users can augment the massive data set that we're drawing from to collect and analyze threat intelligence feeds from Palo Alto Network sources like Autofocus, AWS sources like GuardDuty, or even pull in their own threat intelligence feeds from Qualys, Tenable, to really gain an unmatched sense of risk clarity across their cloud environments. And so when we take a step back and tie in what Upasana was talking about earlier, we see this deeply integrated, full lifecycle, full stack approach to mitigating risks and detecting threats emerge. So where at the build phase and the deploy phase, developers are able to easily scan their IAC templates, their registries, and more for vulnerabilities, with then immediate clarity on what are the most severe issues that they as developers need to address first, all from within their native IDE, SCM, CI/CD tooling. Then to correlate that with the multiple runtime threat vectors that I just covered, again, with the ultimate goal of really automating and simplifying threat detection and prioritization for unmatched risk clarity across cloud environments. So, all right, that's just what we have for you today, really only scratching the surface here on what Prisma Cloud has. So I want to leave you with a few closing thoughts. First, do check out our website if you want to learn more about why more than 2,000 enterprises today have already chosen Prisma Cloud as their threat detection and cloud native security tool of choice to protect their dynamic distributed cloud native environments. If you want to learn more about what Upasana was talking about, identifying risks and vulnerabilities at build and the deployment phase, be sure to download Gartner's Market Guide to Cloud Workload Protection, which is going to go a lot more in depth into what we have limited time to cover here today. And finally, if you're ready to see, what threats might be lurking in your cloud environments that your existing security tools maybe have just missed, request a free 30-day trial of Prisma Cloud. It's a very easy product to operationalize and set up in your environment. And with that, all right, thank you for your time.
Hey everybody, happy Thursday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the headlines for you. First up on DevOps.com is an article that looks at portability in continuous integration. This is an interesting premise by Don McBitty, that the time has come to create some sort of standard for CI tools. It's done in just about every other area of IT in a particular cycle, breaking new ground, coming up with ideas that work well, gaining broad adoption, and then standardizing them for interoperability. CI, it seems, hasn't followed that path, partly because it's such a broad area. but it is an idea whose time has come, particularly with the cloudification of the space. In this article, Don says it is time for a company or even an OSS team to put together a standard and build a tool that implements said standard. Only then will we have interoperability, and from there, portability. It won't be easy, but it's necessary. We can target the OS of our choice and the cloud vendor of our choice, using containers to simplify the differences in host OS or vendor. The ability to use the CI tool of our choice is the next logical step. And there is an article that delves into how organizations can modernize data integration. In times of uncertainty, accurate real-time data becomes essential to informed decision-making. And as the pandemic winds down and businesses begin to reopen, we will see that this is the truth. It's clear that enterprises are clamoring for more analytics than ever. Data engineering is at the heart of operationalizing the delivery of that data, whether it originates and wherever it's needed. That means engineers need to embrace data ops to guarantee continuous data for fast, confident decisions by and for the business. They need a solution that allows them to operationalize their work by abstracting the what of the data, which is the business meaning and the logic, away from the how of the data, which is the technical implementation details that the business doesn't really care about. To achieve this, businesses need to think about data pipelines as dynamic, intelligent sources that can and should be capable of real-time adjustments. This article takes a look at how the real-time data pipelines now can help engineers operationalize their work, deliver a new level of innovation and self-service to the business, and demonstrate their true worth as data heroes. Heroes, I love that name. Love that word. In news, Red Hat has extended the Red Hat Insights Predictive Analytics Cloud platform for managing IT to include support for editions of the Red Hat OpenShift based on Kubernetes and the Red Hat Ansible automation platform. In addition, Red Hat Insights for Red Hat Enterprise Linux now includes the ability to prioritize security alerts, streamline notifications, and track Red Hat subscription consumption. Red Hat Insights provides IT teams with what is basically a co-pilot for managing IT environments. In general, advances in automation and artificial intelligence are making it easier to manage complex IT environments at scale, but we are still a ways away from the true hands-off automated management. Red Hat Insights provides a single console from which teams can collaborate as they become more cross-functional and job functions increasingly converge. All right, over on Container Journal, we call out complexity as the biggest enemy in a software-defined world. This article looks at the evolution of open source code as the main ingredient in so many digital transformation initiatives. Without open source, it's impossible to imagine innovations such as cloud computing, artificial intelligence, IoT, or even those innovators from Amazon to Zoom. But open source's popularity also has brought a downside for enterprises, a tough array of software management challenges. Organizations are struggling with performing operational tasks such as onboarding, integration, patching, and upgrading the software. The answer lies in automation technology that can handle the application lifecycle management chores that have become a natural byproduct of the open source-driven, software-defined world. Operational packages that can automatically handle software installation, configuration, updating, scaling, and patching saves time and money across organizations, industries, and almost any application scenario. It's words to live by for sure. And we look at the double-edged sword of Kubernetes. While it has emerged as the de facto technology for container orchestration and an abstraction layer for containerized applications and services, it is not without its issues. Just ask anyone who's ever worked with Kubernetes. Don't get me wrong, there is a whole lot of goodness in Kubernetes, but all that goodness can add up to a lot of complexity. The learning curve is steep, which means there are a lot of terms, architectural patterns, and entirely new concepts to learn before you know what to do. Kubernetes also teaches a mandatory understanding of distributed architectures, as well as service health, scalability, and fault tolerance, especially with regard to how those elements depend on each other. It's up to each developer to determine whether the complexity of Kubernetes is worth the effort. But considering it is the container orchestration platform most widely used in the industry, I'd say chances are good that yes, the benefits outweigh the challenges. All right, over on Security Boulevard, our resident analyst Richard Steenan takes a look at the recent news that Thoma Bravo plans to snap up Proofpoint for $12.3 billion, which is the largest and latest private equity deal in the cybersecurity industry. Apart from choking on my tea when I read the purchase price, the acquisition really doesn't surprise me, considering the cybersecurity space is very hot right now among the VC crowd. And the folks at Thoma Bravo obviously know a bargain when they see one. Proofpoint is well run, making wise strategic investments in new technologies to stay relevant and growing nicely year over year. It showed 15% revenue growth, or $288 million in the first quarter. It just passed the billion-dollar revenue mark in 2020. And with a market capitalization of $7.5 billion, it was trading at a bit over 7x revenue, which is low when compared to other security firms that are trading at 50 or 60 times their revenue. The only issue Richard really sees with the acquisition is Proofpoint's closest competitor, a little-known company called Microsoft. What lies ahead for Proofpoint under the direction of Thoma Bravo? I guess we'll have to wait and see. And finally, we have an article that looks at the need for network transformation in the financial services sector. We're all well familiar with the way banks and other financial institutions have worked hard to transform their businesses during the pandemic to service their customers effectively. To thrive in today's business environment and beyond, financial institutions must invest in the right technology to transform the network that keeps them operating and differentiating themselves from their competitors. Cloud is a major part of that. Cloud adoption has created new levels of adaptability and scalabilities. Additionally, it has impacted the way financial organizations secure their clients' data and ensures the reliability of their offerings. This data looks at what network transformation for financial services firms looks like and acts like, the security implications of network transformation, and the technologies that are necessary. All right, that's it for the headlines today. Please check back with me on Monday when I'll have a fresh new batch for you. Until then, have a great weekend. And whatever you do, please stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Francis Zelazny, who is the CEO and co-founder of a company called Anonybit. Francis, thank you so much for joining me today. I really do appreciate it. Great to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So tell me a little bit about your company, Anonybit.
So Anonybit is a privacy-first biometric and identity management company. We have a breakthrough in decentralizing biometrics and personal information in a way that cannot be hacked into or stolen by any fraudsters. So what we do is we protect consumer privacy, we enhance digital security, and our mission is to make the world a safer place.
All right, that's great. And obviously, data privacy and personal information those are two very, very hot topics these days with the COVID-19 pandemic raging on, and healthcare organizations increasingly, having so much of our information on them. And now we're getting into the vaccination part of the pandemic, if you will, and so many organizations and so many people actually are getting vaccinated, and we're now grappling with ways to deal with that privacy, the privacy related to whether or not a person has been vaccinated, whether that's actually should be public information or not. But that has given rise to the whole idea of vaccine passports. And so there is kind of an underlying security conversation about vaccine passports and privacy, and interested in hearing what you guys have heard about vaccine passports and as it relates to privacy concerns around them. What are folks having issues regarding privacy concerns and vaccine passports?
There are many, many issues. We can start with where does all this information reside? Mm-hmm. We have in the United States, we have private sector involved with distributing vaccines. We have public sector agencies. We have nonprofit agencies. And that means all of these entities are now, accessing, managing, all of our personal information. And we know that when we think about personal information, there's two. There's the identity information, which fraudsters and hackers and other bad guys, want to get their hands on for other purposes. And then we have the health information itself, which is also, very, very sensitive for obvious reasons. And all of this information is now sitting in, we don't even know where it's sitting. And then we have the issue of the vaccine passports themselves. There's a very lucrative black market for identification cards, or actually you don't even need to buy one. You can probably just print it, at home, because those white cards are handwritten. So there's issues with the vaccine cards and the vaccine passports themselves, the integrity of them, the issuing authority, like who's actually issuing them, the information that's on them, who's presenting them. And the fact is that we don't have any way of knowing, and this is actually something that concerns me greatly, we actually have no way of knowing if the person that's presenting this vaccine card or these vaccine passports is actually the person that got vaccinated. So if we're going to be relying on them, to reopen our society, and people are walking around with fake cards, how can we manage public health? There are real, besides the privacy, there's real public health implications. That is absolutely true, and we've been having this conversation a lot with a number of different people about who actually. How can you know that the person who is holding the card is who they say they are, and they're the ones who actually got the vaccine? Exactly. And to your point, I actually am taking part in a study that Johnson & Johnson started with their 2-dose vaccine, and then as soon as their single dose was approved, I ended up getting the single dose vaccine. But that's a private company, and now they have all of that data on me, and they're going to continue to have data on me for the next few years while we go through this study. But it seems like there are so many different places where this information resides right now. That do you think that we need to kind of move to kind of a single source of truth, if you will, and if so, is that going to be more of a government issue or a government job, if you will, something that the government needs to somehow get involved in and take care of? Well, that's a loaded question, and I've been in biometrics and identity for 20 years, and I cannot imagine this country having a single source of anything. There's a lot of politics around that. The driver's licenses are, a perfect example, but there are ways to federate, if you will, and to have trusted authorities with standards that are, issuing vaccine passports, just like you issue a driver's license, or you issue a passport, or a visa, or other, other means of identification that many, not all, but many, Americans actually, do hold. The issue with the vaccine passports is to set up a way that every issuing entity has set up an infrastructure that protects the information that they're collecting, and they're not required to share that information publicly, but just to send yes, no messages. So the information is not freely distributed and out there, and that those entities are held accountable, with standards, both for the data protection itself while they're holding it, but also to who, they're allowed to share it with. And there are models. It's not like, we've never seen anything like this before anywhere else, but it does require people to, think responsibly. And this is something that I've not really seen, happen so far in the way this is being, these cards and apps are being rolled out.
Right. Yeah, this is new territory for us for sure. But to your point, we've been doing vaccinations for many, many years, and we do have records that are being kept on individuals and their vaccination records. So do you think that eventually we're going to kind of slipstream it into our usual practice, when the kids are vaccinated and they have this vaccination record that becomes part of their medical transcript? Or do you think that, I know right now the vaccination card that I have is a CDC issued card. Is that something that is always going to be kind of separate, apart from what we have with our standard vaccinations? And if so, to your point, how can we ensure that data is going to remain safe?
So I think that with children, it's easy because they have these vaccination records that they have to submit to school. And so the physicians or, they will add that. The real question is, how do you rely on the integrity of these documents when or cards or apps, when you want to reopen society and have people come into theaters and stadiums and, large and other large gatherings. So that's more of my concern than anything else, and then ensuring the privacy of these records means that we cannot rely on central honeypots of data that are just waiting for somebody to, some bad guy to get their hands on. And it's not theoretical. Like this is like the hot ticket now. Is like the vaccination information and imagine all the all the KBA information that can, be accessed. Like when did you get the vaccine? What kind of vaccine? So that's going to become like, what's your mother's maiden name and what's your, your pet's name. Now it's going to be what kind of vaccine did you get? And that's just going to be added. So we need to really think about how do we decentralize this information so there is no central honeypot, and attach an authentication mechanism, a biometric, to that record to ensure that only the person who has been vaccinated is the one that is presenting that card.
That's a good point. And, obviously with a card right now, unless you're checking an ID, even then that's not foolproof. So is your company working with any organization or entity right now to add some sort of biometric capabilities to these vaccination passports that, maybe the mobile app or something like that that's being developed? Or have you seen any efforts so far in that space?
So there's definitely a lot of standards that are being built. Our focus right now is on the decentralization of data and the ability to, from a biometric point of view, not even have biometric information in a central honeypot, and to be able to store and manage biometrics in a decentralized way that is privacy by design inherently, because there's been many attempts in the past to decentralize biometrics, but they've all failed because of a core requirement to have a template. And this is essentially what we've eliminated. We've eliminated the requirement to have a template, and we are still able to do biometric authentication through our breakthrough. And once that is in place, you can then use this infrastructure to store other types of information, health information, other secrets and sensitive data. So that's where our focus is, and we're working with industry to put out this new mechanism, because honestly, this is an emergency. The pandemic accelerated it, but the notion of, data breaches and even biometric data being potentially exposed has been a risk for many, many, many years.
Sure.
And something that, we're finally able to address.
Well, it's definitely a tough topic, and there's a lot going on in that space in general. And I applaud you and your company for being able to advance it. And I hope that we will get to a point as a society where biometrics is part of the security authentication process that doesn't seem like, I know there are some people now that just think that it's a total invasion of privacy. You don't need my fingerprint or whatever. But I think as the technology advances, I think people will become more accepting of the technology. And, I think, advances such as your company will kind of help make it more of a mainstream type of security authentication method. So I wish you guys the best of luck. I think it's great technology, and I think hopefully we'll get the issues regarding vaccine passports and data privacy resolved sooner than later, because it's certainly something that does have to happen before we can really move forward as a society. So thank you very much for having a conversation with me.
Thank you.
All right, you bet. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community: digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Edward Roberts, who is a Director of Strategy for Application Security at Imperva. Edward, thank you so much for taking a couple minutes and talking with me today. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
I am so excited about this topic that we're going to be talking about, which is bad bots. And for lots of personal reasons, I happen to know a bad bot ninja myself. I happen to have spawned a bad bot ninja. My oldest son is he's beaten the bots twice to get PS5. So, if anybody needs any tips or tricks, just reach out to me. I can help you. So, but anyway, you guys recently came out with a report on bad bots, and I think the problem is going to get worse before it gets better. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's one of these. It's the 8th annual report that we've produced, so it's a problem that we've been monitoring for some time. And I think you're right. It's the percentage of bad bot traffic is worse than it has ever been. It's now over a quarter of all internet traffic that we see is actually a bad bot, which is defined as doing something malicious that you didn't authorize. And so the problem seems to be exacerbated. The issue is we're not sure how much of the change is because of the pandemic, because obviously everything has changed with more and more people at home, more and more people moving online, more and more businesses doing things online. So that's obviously had an effect into that trend. But it's certainly up to over a quarter of traffic is now bad bots.
That's not good. Not good at all. So what is it that you guys discovered about kind of in this year's report that really kind of surprised you guys? I mean, besides the fact that it's now a quarter of all internet traffic, that's kind of mind-boggling, actually. But were there any other findings that came out of this report that really surprised you?
Yeah, one of the consistent ones is about the widespread effect on many industries. It's not just one industry that gets affected. Traditionally, a lot of people understood that ticketing for shows or concerts or sporting events was an area where bots were rampant, and that was the case in the past. But now we can safely say they're across all the industries. And I think during the pandemic, and you even alluded to it, the PS5 and gaming consoles and that came out, and various graphics cards and various technology products that were available and launched prior to the holiday season last year, they were ripe for people stealing, and hoarding those, not stealing, but hoarding those items in order to resell them somewhere else and arbitrage and make a profit. We've seen it in other industries, be it airlines. We've seen it in gift card abuse. We're even seeing a lot of bot traffic now, checking for vaccines online and checking for testing and COVID testing, checking for the availability of vaccines. Now, you might consider that a vaccine checking bot is not doing anything malicious because it's actually providing a good service. But for those organizations that are providing that information, humans might be having trouble getting access to it because bots are dominating that infrastructure.
Okay. All right. I know also that, as a media company, sometimes our sites get hit with bots, and that will cause the site to slow down, or even kind of, we get the error codes and things like that. And that really does degrade the user experience. And I would imagine with the increase in bot traffic that we have seen, that there's been a widespread impact on user experience in general, in a number of industries. Is that something that was kind of borne out by your survey? Is are we seeing kind of a degraded or an impact on user experience because of these bots?
It certainly does have an impact, right? If you think that, and I'll take a very, very common example of bot abuse is credential stuffing, which is we're going to run a bunch of stolen credentials against all login pages on many sites and just see which ones authenticate. And so if one of those does authenticate, because you might run millions of credentials, we've even seen examples of 40 plus million credentials run in a 24-hour period on one site.
Wow.
So if you find a bunch of accounts that you can get access to, then whatever is in that account. So now imagine what business you're in. There's something inside that account. It could be personal health information. It could be credit card information. It could be your addresses where products get delivered to. It could be any manner of things. It could be your bank balance. It could be any financial information that you have in there. What happens is that the customer whose account that is, they could deal with fraud or some downstream effect of that. So the customer experience for them is going to be very acute. And then the business itself has to deal with arising, whether it be fraud or customer complaints. They have to deal with those customer support issues. So, and then you've also got, we're serving a quarter of our traffic to non-humans, So therefore, you're going, we've got to have infrastructure that covers that amount so that our website doesn't go down for our human users. So you've got all of these impacts that could affect the business and affect, obviously, the end users from the bad bot traffic. The bots are the first starting point of credential stuffing accounts attacks. And so you can see that the ramifications go deep into the organization and to the customer.
Yeah, well, I guess we should clarify that not all bots are bad, but there are certainly there's been an increase on those in those that are out to do harm, basically, and out there for nefarious purposes. But do you think that we've had this increased reliance on automation over the last couple of years? Do you think that kind of gave rise to this idea of the bots and then the bad bots and just the kind of the twisting of hey, this is a great idea, let's do this, and somebody said, well, I can do this and I can make money doing this and I could potentially hurt somebody in the process, but the bad guys are always going to try to find a way to twist something. So have we become too reliant on automation? And that's kind of maybe the reason why we've seen such an increase in this bad bot traffic?
I think you're right. I think there's a lot more tools that are available, across the board that you could use to automate a task that humans are bad at, right? So, one simple one would be just checking that your website is up and running and making sure that it's doing its job. You can have automation do that rather than rely on a human to go back and do it. That would be an example of a bot. You've got your search engines, which would be a good bot. You want them to index your site. You want them to scrape your content so that when somebody searches for your information, they can serve up that content. There are many good reasons why you would have automation to help your business. What we're saying is that there's a slice of this traffic, and it's averages at around a quarter of the traffic that is bad and nefarious and doing something that you didn't authorize. So it's outside of that good bot or good automation that you're alluding to, and that's the bit that you've got to worry about. And I think there's a wide range of tools, but there's also a wide range of functionalities that people have put on their website. So the more functionalities you put on there, the more ability for somebody to automate something to exploit that functionality. And I'll give you an example. So if you put a login page, we've already talked about that one, that's ripe for abuse. If you put a bunch of prices or unique proprietary content on there, somebody is going to be scraping that. So they'd scrape the prices to maybe beat you in the market. That might be your competitors doing that. They might be scraping other content. Maybe you have product reviews or product information that's there. They might scrape that and use that and post it somewhere else. That could hurt you from an SEO perspective. There are other use cases where you'd say, if you have a lot of e-commerce companies did gift cards. They provide gift cards, and they also provide the ability for you to check the balance of any gift cards that you might have in your wallet. So automation can be used to sit there and iterate through your 16, 25-digit number, whatever it is, and see which ones have a balance, and then go and use those cards somewhat, to spend that balance. So again, it's the functionality that you put on your site should also be considered, as well as these tools that are out there.
Okay. So what are some of the things that companies can do then to kind of help protect their websites and their data from these bad bots and help kind of keep their customer experience on par with what it should be?
I think it's consider what functionality you want to make available, just as a good practice. Is this something that is good for our customers and we want to do it? And then if it is, you need to work out how to protect it. So you need to put something in place that protects it. And that's obviously a service that companies like Imperva that I work for does. And so there are tools that are out there to reduce this amount of mitigation of bots that are on there and mitigate the problem. But it's one of those things that bots are unfortunately, I think a fact of life, and they're not going to be going away. You can manage this problem. You never really eradicate it because it is such a challenging one. And you don't do the same, if you think about how you want to stop bots, you want to put a bunch of hurdles in their way and make it like an obstacle course. And you want to trip them at the easier hurdles before you put the harder hurdles in front of them. And so there are solutions there. And a lot of people might be familiar with, one of the tools that you can use to capture some portion of bots is captures, the little squiggly letters or the pictures that you have to click on. That would be a form of trying to defeat some portion of bots. But there are also bots that can get around captures and in various different ways as well. So it's about the sophistication level of the bot that is going against your business. There's kind of different techniques that you can do.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Great. So, looking ahead, do you see that we are going to see maybe a different kind of bot? Because we have a pretty good understanding of what the bad bots are right now, but looking ahead, what can we expect in that area? Do you guys have any insight into that?
I think what you're seeing is that the evolution of bots has been from, they were very simple and easy to block. They kind of rushed through a website really fast. So you would say a human didn't do that. So you'd block it based on rate limits and things like this. What you see now is that they've become more sophisticated and more human-like in their behavior. They're trying to behave as if a human is on a browser, on the website. And so they're doing things like pausing, they're moving their mouse, they're scrolling the page, they're delaying their clicks, they're behaving like humans. And so we're seeing that's the evolution, is that they're trying to be evasive, they're trying to avoid any detection tools that might be there, and they're trying to appear more human-like in their behavior. And so this bot's sophistication is certainly something that is shifting, and they're moving even more to more machine learning techniques to try and get around whatever is there to try and prevent them.
That is both interesting and slightly horrifying. So thanks for sharing that. So if anybody's interested in getting a copy of the Bad Bot Report, are you guys making it available?
Yep, it's available on imperva.com. And so go and download it. It gives you a whole rich set of information, broken down by industries, broken down by bot sophistication level. And it's got a good explanation of thinking about your industry, what might be going after your industry. So I encourage you to go to imperva.com and download it.
That sounds like a great resource. Edward, thank you so much for having the conversation with me about bad bots. And as we both said, it's a problem that's not going to be going away anytime soon. So thank you guys for putting together the report. It sounds like it's a great resource for any number of industries. So thanks again. Appreciate your time.
Thank you for your time.
All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned. All right, welcome back, everybody. Next up, we have Mitch Ashley's Analyst Corner. He speaks with Andy Dovgan, who is the CSO of a company called Creatio. They talk about low-code and no-code technology and how it is helping organizations get through their business transformation efforts and why it's become such a hot commodity in today's technology space. So let's give it a listen. Hey everybody, happy Thursday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the webinars preview for you. As always, I tell you about all the great webinars that are coming up on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. So here are 3 that are coming up very quickly in the hopes that you'll be able to mark your calendar and join us. The first one is called Hack My Java Application, How Snyk and Red Hat developers stay performant and secure. This one is happening tomorrow, Friday, April 29th at 11 a.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard. It is sponsored by Snyk. This is a live hack webinar, which I'm very excited about, and it gives attendees the chance to see how vulnerabilities in the Java ecosystem are exploited using commonly known attack vectors. Some of the things that will be covered include some of the most commonly known exploits for Java applications, how some of these vulnerabilities can be exploited, how to use the Red Hat CRDA to find direct and transitive dependencies in your code, how to use Sneak for analysis to exploit, for analysis on exploit maturity, vulnerable functions, existing patches, and malicious information, and finally, how to use Sneak to automatically remediate security issues in your Java application. Good stuff there. The next webinar is called How to Back Up, Share, and Archive Stateful Applications on OpenShift. This one is happening Tuesday, May 4th at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. It is sponsored by Red Hat Marketplace. It was stateful applications such as databases, analytics, and AI ML are onboarded on OpenShift. There is a need for data protection, faster collaboration, and low-cost archival for these applications. Robin Cloud Native Storage automates and simplifies these operations. So in this webinar will take a look at that technology and will show attendees how to deploy Robin CNS through Red Hat Marketplace with a pay-as-you-go pricing model, back up entire stateful apps, the data plus the metadata plus the configuration to cloud for data protection, to how to share a data share entire data applications across teams. Why was that so difficult for me to say? And archive entire applications, including data, to free compute resources. Great stuff on that one. Looking forward to that one. The final webinar I want to let you know about is called Next Gen Releases, Boost Velocity and Quality with BSM. This one is happening Wednesday, May 5th at 11 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. It is sponsored by Flatora. This webinar takes a look at how release managers can adopt value stream management and elevate their DevOps implementation. So attendees will learn how to implement value stream management in their release management processes, introduce value stream centricity into their day-to-day workflows, and leverage flow and release metrics to eliminate waste and reduce complexity. As always, the team at Flatora does a great job, and value stream management is one of their areas of expertise. So definitely one worth checking out, this webinar. All right, that's it for this batch of webinars. Check back with me on Monday when I'll have a fresh new batch for you. Until then, please have a great weekend. Stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist. Well, I'm joined by Andy Dovgan, who is CSO with Curatio, and we're talking about low-code, no-code. Guess what? A topic we keep talking about. It's very hot right now. Andy, welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And yes, I'm very passionate about low code and no code, and hopefully it will be an interesting conversation for the audience.
I'm sure it will. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and definitely tell us a little bit about Curatio too.
I'll start with the company. So Curatio is located in the intersection of three product categories. The first one is low code, no code platform. Second one is business process management automation. And then the third one is CRM or customer engagement. We work with mid-size and enterprise organizations, and we help them to automate operational and customer-facing processes because of the combination of those three technologies. And we are pushing a lot into low-code and no-code space, so we enable non-technical users to go and create those applications and automate processes. But we work in a very close alliance with IT and operations and help them to have more kind of transformational and wider strategical look on low-code technologies. And I have been with the company for quite a while, so I have a good history with the organization. And I'm really, really pleased to be in this market because I'm very passionate and I'm very, very thrilled to see development of low code, no code, and how it introduces lots of changes to the marketplace.
Perfect. It's been both tragic but also interesting time the last 12 to 18 months with what's happened in the economy and the changes in software, digital transformation, moving to the cloud. Low code, no code's right there with it in terms of prominence, acceptance, use. I'm curious of what you've seen of kind of the drivers of why are people, I mean, we're not talking about your father's Excel spreadsheet anymore. We're talking about some real business apps. And I'm curious what you see as some of the drivers that have really emerged.
Well, we saw a tremendous interest to low-code and no-code technologies in general, because I think that low-code and no-code is about the need for speed. And people realize that they need to accelerate specifically those businesses that needed to completely change their business model, and they needed to change the way how they think about deploying applications. They don't have those 4, 6, 10 months anymore to deploy a transformational enterprise application. They need to really speed it up. And that's where interest to low-code, no-code technology really kicked in. And because we operate on this mid-sized to enterprise layer, we got lots of different requests, specifically from financial services institutions, from manufacturing companies that either needed to change significant portion of their business, or they needed to deploy new processes and new use cases. For example, they would need to do a fully online lending process because, for example, the branch network is no longer open or has very limited capacity. And we worked and we teamed up with lots of customers and partners of ours to help them to build up this strategy internally about how do I deploy those apps, how do I engage with business, how do I accelerate the time to market, but also we help them to achieve their business goals as they set up for as a deployment.
And we traditionally think of low code, no code as tools that business folks, business units, and departments are probably using as the primary users. But we've also seen a lot of requirements change, a lot of speed to market, as you talked about, need for speed. Mm-hmm. Have you seen that yourself in terms of who is driving the use of low code, no code?
Yes, and I believe that it's very similar to any evolving technology market. When kind of the trend emerges, then it's not fully categorized. And then when technology gets more popular and people start get kind of better understanding and it matures, then you start putting kind of categories and you try to structure the market. So that's why there are multiple categories within low code, no code space. And there is a perception when it comes for no code, for example, that no code is only about your kind of complex Excel or Access databases that you will take and you will create a new application based on that, right? Based on what used to be an Access, but now it's a simple app only for departmental use, and you will engage only citizen developers. But there's only one category of that. Low code can help you with integrations. Low code can help you with larger transformational projects. And low code can be an enabler that helps you to achieve your business goals. For example, here at Croatia, we focus on both departmental use. For example, you have citizen developers who want to create an application to achieve a particular goal, but we also work with enterprises to roll out more enterprise-wide solution to solve a very strong impact problem for them. And we would use low-code, no technology to help to get to the value quicker and eliminate shortage of resources. Because specifically when we started discussing this change with COVID and all stuff that actually occurred, one of the issues was a shortage and limitation of technical resources. Now, when my backlog got extended and now I need to create those 10 different applications, how I can achieve that with the same headcount or sometimes even with less headcount. And that's where low code can be extremely useful.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point of, while you may have resources to get some things done with tools, we don't necessarily have extra people as well as extra time to adopt them. How is IT accepting low code, no code? Because I've seen some shifts there, pretty significant.
It's I love having those conversations with IT professionals because you would usually get two reactions, and but no matter which reaction you get, if you do your job and you kind of maintain conversation, everybody gets excited because it always a help and it's always a possibility to move quicker and move further. The first reaction would be, well, now when you enable all those citizen developers, like how you will maintain governance, how would you administer, how would you manage that? Because if people go and create unlimited number of apps and processes by themselves, how do you manage security? How do you make sure that they don't break the architecture and those kind of things? And then the second reaction would be, wow, cool, now we can get done more stuff, we're excited, let's go in and start implementing. But I think that both opinions are super important, because you want to have a balance of those. Because you want to have a strategy and a very clear vision on how you will manage that at scale. Because you can create all sorts of different apps, but without having a right strategy and collaboration between IT operations and business, you can end up having those multiple disintegrated and repeatable technologies. For example, one of the study in financial services market said that about 62% of processes and use cases are being repeated in different applications, right? And people, it's not super productive to keep repeating stuff. But in the meantime, it also, this governance should be democratic enough so that it enables ability to go and configure. And we believe that in Croatia, as we develop our product, we are finding this right balance. How do we set up a layer of the core application, of user permissions, of security, to make sure that IT people can govern all the structure? But in the meantime, how do we give this power to citizen developers, and how we help them to do stuff that doesn't need to be done by IT people, really?
You know, it's interesting you mentioned strategy and making low-code, no-code part of your strategy. It wasn't that long ago, I think folks saw low-code, no-code as sort of the shadow IT problem. We don't necessarily use that as the term any longer. I think citizens developers kind of taken over that in some cases. But now, you know, with DevOps and multiple pipelines of software development, you know, there's always integration, coordination of features, capabilities. You know, you may make changes to existing systems while you're rolling out new capabilities. You can't really necessarily always operate as an island on your own. You've got to fit into some kind of a rollout, a product, or DevOps software processes. Is that consistent with what you've seen?
No, absolutely. I think that, like, from one hand, the platform should evolve, and thus you need to have the right approach towards DevOps and continuous deployment and improvement. And in the same time, your application should evolve. I couldn't imagine that an application that was built 1 year ago should be the same 1 year from now, right? So you need to keep introducing those changes, but also as platform changes and as platform gets more and more capabilities, your application will be getting more capabilities as well. How do you manage that? And this should be a priority for deployment. It should be a priority for application lifecycle management capability, because without that, it will create a disaster. And actually, in our research and development cycle, we do spend and invest a lot of energy and time and effort making sure it's done right as a foundation, so that you can go ahead and scale that.
Now, you talked about Croatia as one of the things that you provide as a platform, because oftentimes we think of low-code, no-code. It can be a tool or an app, but also oftentimes a platform constitutes more or means something more broad than that. It usually involves integration, maybe some management capabilities. How do you define what a platform is for low-code, no-code?
Well, we have a number of components. So we have, as you mentioned, Mitch, we have a platform that allows you to create, it has, for example, UI designers, and you can go and create multiple UI, different UIs for different business units and different users. You can create analytics, and there are lots of flexibility around that. We have business process management tools that allow you to then take this UI or specific workflow and connect it into like meaningful sequential flow. We have some additional capabilities around case management that sometimes your business process is linear and you can use workflow tools for that, but sometimes you need kind of more fluid automation technology or capability, and we use for that what we call dynamic case management. But then on the top of that, we have a lot of components. Think about that as Lego blocks. For customer engagement or for operational processes, if you're an insurance company and you want to automate a claim management process, you probably want to have a customer record. You want to have a claim or a case record, and you have some additional elements. So we provide you with a number of predefined and ready-to-use components, and then you can come in and create your own application, pick the ones that you want to use, and this helps you to eliminate a needed time just to develop that from the scratch. And underneath, we have ability to scale that. We have the right engine that allows us to continuously add some additional capabilities. We have additional seamless integration capabilities, and also we can operate on a scale of like 10,000 users. So those kind of things we have in place to make sure that our customers can have 10,000 users, but in the meantime, they can have hundreds of different use cases automated within the platform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also it seems that mobile is also another deployment platforms, right? So it's kind of like, I think of it as nowadays it's ordering fries. I'd like fries with that. I want mobile too, unless it's a mobile-centric app. But that seems to be near the top of the list of requirements.
Yes, Mitch, and sometimes it starts with fries. They say we need a mobile-first experience, and of course, vendors should be ready for that.
Very good. Well, this has been great talking with you. Where can folks find out more about Cratio?
Yeah, so I guess there are a number of resources where you can go and find more data on us. Of course, you can go and visit our website, cratio.com. We do have very extended profiles at G2 Crowd or, for example, Gartner Peer Insights. That's where you can go and find end user reviews. We're very proud of our NPS and overall user feedback and customer feedback. So feel free to go and check out us on public listings, but also on our website, and we will be happy to have a dialogue with you.
Okay, fantastic. Well, Andy, it's been great having you, Andy from Cratio. Hope you have a good day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mitch, for having me, and thank you for a meaningful conversation.
You bet.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
All right, welcome back, everybody. In our last segment today, we have The View with Vizard. Mike Vizard talks with Sysdig CEO Suresh Vasudevan. The company just garnered $188 million more in funding and financing, and that was actually just announced yesterday. And Suresh explains why the convergence of IT roles requires a different approach to managing IT. This is a fascinating conversation, and I'm just so excited about Sysdig in general getting the financing, but let's get right to this conversation.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Suresh Vasudevan, who's the CEO of Sysdig. They are just coming off another round of financing for $188 million for a total valuation of an astounding $1.19 billion. Suresh, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Mike. Thanks for having me, and pleasure to talk to you all.
So now that you bought everybody a beer for the company, what's the plans? What do you need this kind of funding for? What does the outlook for the company look like?
Yeah, so maybe I'll start with some context on sort of what led to the funding and how are we thinking about plans going forward. In a nutshell, I think the big driver for the funding from the lens of an investor was simply a belief that cloud and container security is arguably one of the most significant security markets to emerge over the last decade. And we're just getting started. Companies' journey to the cloud is at an early stage. Companies' adoption of containers, Kubernetes, and microservices as the underlying architecture is at an early stage. We've established a strong lead with our secure DevOps approach for container and cloud security. And so there was a very strong sort of appetite on the part of investors to participate in a really large market, I would say, Mike. So that was the sort of driver behind the funding and the massive interest. From our vantage point, there are 2 or 3 priorities that we are focused on with this funding, right? So the first and foremost, we have R&D teams in 6 different locations around the globe, investing both in our open source foundation and in our security platform. And our first priority is to grow the R&D teams by a substantial. We've been investing significantly, and we'll continue to invest in growing our R&D teams in all of these locations at a very aggressive pace, because we see an opportunity for continued innovation and being the leader in the secure DevOps approach. So that's the first priority for us. The second will more than double our sales and marketing presence in the US and Europe in just the next 6 months or so. And we plan to enter newer markets in Asia Pac. And so that's a second big priority for us. And then I'll just stop by mentioning the third priority. One of the drivers of our success has been very strong partnership and ecosystem investments with cloud providers, with Kubernetes platforms, with CI/CD technology companies, integrating our product into all of these environments. And we are deploying as a SaaS solution with footprint around the globe. And so we expect to double down on partnering investments as well. And that's the third priority for us.
One of the things we hear about all the time now is observability. People started talking about monitoring back in the day, and you guys kind of jumped into that space. But what is the difference between observability and monitoring, and how is that changing the way people approach the management of IT from your perspective?
Yeah, to me, I think the semantics of is monitoring different from observability, or I'm not sure that I would argue at an English level that there's a fundamental difference between monitoring observability and the term visibility that you might use for it. To me, I think what's more interesting is that the underlying problems in that you need to address to gain deep visibility are radically different as you move to a microservices architecture, whether that is to solve performance problems in applications or to solve security problems or to address compliance needs, right? And so let's talk a little bit about what's so different about the underlying sort of problems you have to solve for visibility. First and foremost, I think as you move into a microservices world where a single application is not a single monolithic code base, but it's hundreds of building blocks, containerized building blocks being stitched together at runtime by Kubernetes, the context is now established at a logical level. So what do I mean by context? If I want to understand what is an application boundary, the way I define an application boundary in a traditional application is to know these are the VMs that are running my databases. These are the IP addresses associated with those VMs. These are my VMs running my app servers. And here's the connection between all of those. So I can draw a boundary around my application using a few physical parameters, if you will. Today, in a modern world, that same application is made up of hundreds of containers being stitched together. And the way you understand how these containers map to each other is by looking at metadata labels embedded within Kubernetes, embedded within the container itself. And so I'll give you an example, a really good example of a CISO who described the problem they have. He has a very traditional vulnerability management tool from one of the leading vulnerability management vendors. And his comment was, in my container platform, they have a container platform. This is a leading financial bank that's a customer of ours. Over 9,000 nodes in their container platform. And his comment was, I get a vulnerability report that lists the host addresses of my various hosts and tells me what's wrong with the Java packages running on those. It's useless because the container at the point where they ran that scan may be on one particular host. The very next minute, it may be on a completely different host. They do not understand how to interpret Kubernetes. And so when I step back, microservices present a very fundamental problem for visibility because you have to extract data from entities that are hard to extract data from, i.e. containers. And you have to make sense of that data by looking at metadata and context. And that's really different for observability companies and security companies. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Do you think those challenges are holding people back from making the transition to microservices? When I think about it, there's serverless computing frameworks, and IT is more complex than ever. And are people going, this is all great stuff, but I can't get there from where I am today?
Yeah, so I think if I look at the impetus for adoption of containers, there's a truism, which is the people that are most benefited with the shift to containers are developers, right? Simply because the burden of interoperability, testing, the burden of making sure my code works well for various different environments that I might deploy in is now somewhat freed for the developer, and they can start really focusing on their application. The burden shifts to DevOps, right? And so the first comment I would make is the tide towards containers is really hard to turn back. The tide towards cloud adoption and modern cloud native applications is really hard to turn back because the developers are benefited. From a business user perspective, if I'm going to get my application much faster, I'm getting code revisions many times a day, and I'm able to deploy innovation at a much faster pace, it's extremely hard to hold that tide back from really unfolding. And so the actual burden shifts to two other groups. The first group is DevOps that's now tasked with, given that we are adopting containers and Kubernetes and moving to the cloud, you need to find different tooling, whether that's to solve your performance problems or to solve your security problems. And the burden shifts to security teams that really have to say, given a different environment, how do I make sure that if my legacy tools are not able to support what I need to do, I adopt sort of modern security tooling built for containers, built for Kubernetes, built for cloud. And that's what we are seeing. I don't see a slowdown. If anything, I see an acceleration in adoption. That's really what led to this massive demand for funding. But there's also an appetite to rethink your underlying visibility tools and security tools as well.
There's a lot of hype around digital business transformation as part of that acceleration conversation. Are you starting to see more workloads starting to show up on your platform that people want to manage and monitor, or what's been the impact so far?
Yeah, I would say if I just were to step back and look at the calendar year 2020, a disastrous year at a human level, but in terms of technology adoption, cloud adoption, it's a shame to say this, but arguably the biggest impetus to sort of adoption of modern cloud architectures was probably the pandemic. In many ways, if I were to just characterize, our second half growth was high triple digit growth compared to the same time the prior year. And it was very high growth compared to the first half of 2020. In just the fourth quarter alone, Mike, the number of large node count Kubernetes deployments that we were engaged in, the number of large cloud deployments we were engaged in was more than the prior 4 quarters put together. And to me, that is the clearest sign of inflection that we saw, is just really significant sort of move towards microservices, containers, Kubernetes, and sort of deployments in the public cloud.
There's also a lot of conversation these days about DevSecOps, and a lot of it is aspirational at the moment, but where do you think we are on this journey, and how do you envision all that coming together?
So I think we call our platform the Secure DevOps platform. So we are deep believers in the intersection of security and DevOps, right? And it's useful to step back and break that down into what does that really mean. And to us, there are 3 fundamental aspects of DevSecOps, Secure DevOps, right? The first aspect that's articulated quite extensively is as you move towards continuous integration and continuous deployment where software is updated several times a day, the ability to inject security after the development process and as a stop in the pre-production deployment is no longer viable. You have to embed security upstream into the development process. That's reality today, as almost every single customer of Sysdig uses us to scan images even as they're uploaded into the registry, to use admission controllers to say, if I have vulnerabilities that are high severity, vulnerabilities don't allow the production deployment of those images. And so baking your security upstream and shifting left is the first implication. The second implication is that as you move towards a modern cloud applications, and as you adopt microservices as the underlying methodology, runtime security becomes radically different. And so the second big implication, when I think about Secure DevOps, the first implication is shift left. The second is modern runtime environments, which are really containers running with Kubernetes as the orchestrator. How do I detect activity like someone is launching a shell prompt in a database container? I see that as unusual or risky behavior. Stop that container or start taking a forensic capture so I can go back and understand exactly what happened. I had a container that disappeared because it was ephemeral yesterday. Something bad happened. I want to go back and do forensic investigation on that. How do I know exactly how to investigate a container that's no longer there? So those are all examples of the second major implication of DevSecOps, which is runtime security for modern microservice environments. The third implication, sorry, I'm just going to finish with the third implication, which is quite simply, as I move to the public cloud, configuration control, permission control, and tracking user activity with the sprawl of the public cloud becomes extremely challenging. How do I do a good job of understanding my cloud security risks, if you will? So those are the three implications: shift left, runtime, and cloud security risks.
As part of that, you guys launched Falco, and then you've also made some contributions to the Linux community in terms of securing the microkernel architecture a little more. Why are you making those kinds of investments? What's in it for you guys?
Great question, Mike. The company was founded by Loris. Loris's background, he created Wireshark in his prior life. He was a co-creator of Wireshark, another extremely well-known open source packet analyzer, and started Sysdig with one really defining problem, which is as the world moves to the cloud and uses containers, I need granular data to be able to analyze exactly sort of why a security breach might have happened or why an application's not performing well. How do I get the rich data that I need when I move into containerized environments, right? And so but true to our DNA, Loris again started by saying, let me not build a commercial company to solve this problem. First and foremost, let me make instrumentation available that everybody can use. And so when I step back today, open source is a really fundamental aspect of how we go to market. And there are 2 or 3 big benefits. It's interesting, it's philosophical for us, but from a customer standpoint, there are some real benefits. The first thing that a really major financial customer basically said, I have roughly 120 plus CloudTrail threat detection rules that I have put in place for my bank. The fact that you guys are translating those into Falco rules means that I get deep transparency into exactly how that rule is constructed instead of really complete opaque out-of-the-box rules. And so the first thing that I think open source gives you is transparency, so everybody can look at exactly how the code is performing. And ultimately, we believe that's good for both security and for customer confidence. The second thing I would say is the pace of innovation that we are able to bring to bear because we have community contributions. We have AWS contributing to Falco, Red Hat community contributing to Falco. There are dozens of large organizations that are now part of the Falco community. We think that actually it's impossible for a commercial organization to match the pace of innovation if you can truly build an open source community around Falco. So those are some of the reasons why we are deep believers in open source. And it's not just Falco. Sysdig is open source. We use Prometheus in our platform. Generally speaking, we are big believers in open source, leveraging open source, and then building a commercial platform on top of that open source foundation.
It seems like you can't go a day in this business without somebody talking about AI and machine learning algorithms. So how do you think that's going to play out in the context of IT operations, and what should people look forward to?
Yeah, I think sometimes the danger with overhyped terms is that you start become inured to those terms or start disbelieving those. I will say AI and machine learning is powerful. Let me start with challenges with applying AI and machine learning in the security world. Oftentimes, what you've found is that simply blindly applying AI and machine learning has produced a lot of false positives, or false signals. And so there's some danger with blindly applying AI and machine learning. That said, we, in our platform, find AI and machine learning to be an extremely powerful aid to what we're doing. And I'll give you a couple of examples. One area where we've applied AI meaningfully is to profile the behavior of a container and allow you to set whitelist and blacklist security rules for what a container should be allowed to do and not allowed to do. And just to dig deeper into this, when we started applying machine learning, what we found is that when you're looking at access patterns for things like what file systems or is that a container using, there's a very, very steady learning. So within a few hours to days of learning, you can pattern the behavior in a really nice way so that anomalies stand out in a significant manner. But when we apply that to network connections, we find that the amount of time you need to spend in order to make sure that you're patterning every possible network connection and recognizing anomalies intelligently is much harder, because network connections tend to be much more diverse in nature, right? And so it's an example where we are able to help customers set security policies by profiling a container in a very powerful way, but it's also an example where you have to be careful about blindly applying machine learning. Another example, which is very, very effective, is Falco can be used to set policies in a manner that's very powerful, because it looks at every possible activity within containers, and now within cloud. By looking at CloudTrail logs, you can do all kinds of detections. We are now learning how to tune Falco by using machine learning so that it does not produce false positives. And we've seen some really powerful results at customers when we applied an AI-based tuner to make sure that you're not sort of setting rules that generate too much noise.
Mm-hmm. How do you think this is all going to play out from the role of the IT team? Is there going to be one super administrator that can manage everything? If everything shifts left, does the developer take over everything? And then what are the allocation of job functions going to start looking like?
Yeah, great question, Mike. And I will start by just saying, I wish there was a one-size-fits-all. I would absolutely tell you that different organizations that I see in the same industry, same size, are at different stages of maturity. But there are a few themes that are becoming crystal clear. The first theme, I think, is IT is evolving into DevOps. IT ops is evolving into DevOps. And what does that really mean? What that really means is that more and more people staffing the ops function come with a developer background. More and more people staffing the ops function think of infrastructure as code. Think about, how do I set templates in place so that sort of I'm managing infrastructure as code. I'm managing policy as code. I'm managing APIs and discipline around APIs. So those are the kind of things that DevOps people need to be able to understand, rather than simply sort of manually use UI to configure servers and storage and networks and so on. You're starting to get people that are really all about understanding how to code and how to think about automation and really build a framework where, much like you're releasing code, you're managing infrastructure in a similar manner. So that's sort of one discerning theme. The second theme that we clearly see is that siloed functions for security or networking are hard to sustain. When Kubernetes subsumes networking, what's the difference between someone who's a DevOps leader managing Kubernetes versus networking that's actually embedded inside your Kubernetes itself? And that's particularly true of security. It's extremely hard for the security team to sit outside the DevOps function. Now, does that mean it reports into DevOps? I don't think so. What I'm seeing more and more is that the security team has people that work alongside DevOps teams. And most of our customers, we have security practitioners that probably spend more of their day with their DevOps counterparts than with perhaps other security functions, right? And so that's a second theme we're seeing, is a convergence where functions are collaborating more closely. And what often that means is that you need a shared source of truth. You need a data that both of them are looking at in the same way. But those are some of the themes we're seeing: emergence of DevOps to replace IT ops, convergence between DevOps functions and other sort of functions, in particular security, but even networking and storage teams.
All right, so it looks like our historic dysfunction will finally give way to some cross-functional teams that actually work. That'll be great.
Or at least we can hope so.
Yes. Suresh, thanks for being on the show.
Pleasure. Thank you very much, Mike.
All right, guys, back to you in the studio.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, that's a wrap on today's TechStrong TV broadcast. We will be back on Monday with a brand new episode for you. Tomorrow, Monday marks the beginning of May 3rd, I think it is. And we've got a lot in store for the month of May. So tune in on Monday and we'll get things kicked off. Until then, I hope everybody has a great weekend. And whatever you do, please stay safe.